take a few seconds here. All right. So here is our itinerary. I believe everyone was sent a copy of these topics prior to, but before I introduce our first speaker, I want to say that this is a procurement session, but we definitely work closely with our economic development team to provide and advertise opportunities for businesses to work with the city. So alongside ensuring our procurement requirements are met. So now I will pass this along to Catlin.
Good morning, thanks Mika. Good morning everyone and happy Thursday. Thanks for joining us today. I think it's a really great event and a really great opportunity for us as a city, but also for the business community as well. Just a few housekeeping pieces for me. I'd just like to mention both my team members are here today. We've got Wendy Wagner, our land sales coordinator, as well as Jana Rowe, our business retention specialist. So they're in the chat if you have any questions today. Additionally, we're very thankful for the Legislative Services and Procurement team for taking the time today in preparation of delivering this educational material. So thank you to your team and to Communications for making sure this event is well attended, as well as thank you for holding some space for me to just go over quickly, high level, a number of supports, tools, and information in economic development. The City of Lloydminster and the Economic Development team is committed to supporting the business community, delivering timely and effective information, services, as well as to secure and retain business investment. One of our tools is the business toolkit. So that can be found at lloydminster.ca/toolkit. It is curated by our team and is an excellent resource. As we move through 2021 and continue to navigate the pandemic, please check up for regular updates and reach out to our team for assistance at any time. We're definitely here to help. We also send out regular newsletters and with major updates. So watch for those as well. One of them being yesterday, as we announced the telecom communications update, where SaskTel and TELUS are combinedly joining hands to provide fiber to Lloydminster, which is extremely exciting for the existing business, as well as an attraction of new business. The City of Lloydminster has partnered with Startup Lloydminster to support our entrepreneurs with hands-on management, education assistance, technical and vital business support services, networking resources, financial advice, as well as advice on how to seek financial assistance. Startup Lloydminster also cooperates with many other organizations and mentors to help our business community succeed. For more information regarding their services, visit startuployd.com. They have reopened their co-working space this week and are following all COVID-19 guidelines. So we're really excited to have them back online. They have been offering virtual meetings and educational pieces, but the physical space is back open again. One thing I'd like to remind, I know a lot of the businesses here locally know, but the City of Lloydminster in its entirety follows the Saskatchewan public health orders. So the current Lloydminster COVID-19 information can be found at lloydminster.ca/COVID-19. So it is a unique situation being a border city, and we do have two provinces to deal with, both Saskatchewan and Alberta. And for ease and with the pulse of health being with Saskatchewan, we as a city follow the Saskatchewan guidelines. So if there's any questions on that, my team can assist you with that and get you in the right direction with the right officials of the Saskatchewan government. Further to that, Lloydminster business owners and entrepreneurs are the backbone of our community. We'd like to thank you for driving our economy forward, creating jobs and opportunities, and joining us here today. Next slide, please. Just high level, economic development for the City of Lloydminster is guided by 5 simple pillars outlined in our strategic plan: business retention and expansion, business attraction, business development and diversification, land division for economic development, as well as tourism, destination marketing, and event hosting. Next slide. In the fall of 2020, the City of Lloydminster conducted our annual business climate survey with Insightrix Research Inc., surveying by phone over 100 businesses locally, randomly in a cross-section of industries, with the overall goal of capturing feedback from the Lloydminster business community. The survey findings assist us in determining where we're going to invest, how we prioritize, and how we need to grow, diversify and retain and expand our existing business community, and where we put our resources to help. Specific research objectives of the study found, specific research objectives of the study, strengthening the communication with local business leaders and owners and key decision makers to help and establish further enhancing working relationships, assessing the impact of COVID-19 to the Lloydminster business community. Obviously that was new to 2020 and will continue in 2021. Achieving a sense of economic pulse of the Lloydminster marketplace, identifying the key strengths associated with conducting businesses in Lloydminster to ensure that the city is able to market and attract more business and skilled labor. Identifying key issues and challenges or barriers, so conducting barriers that businesses in Lloydminster are having, and ensure that the city prioritizes future operational plans, economic initiatives, and investments accordingly. We also compare our findings to previous surveys. So 2019 was our first survey. We compare the 2019 and the 2020 survey results, identifying any shifts that have occurred within the past year. Next slide, please. Our findings included the following. Satisfaction with the city remains stable despite the challenge of 2020. Satisfaction with availability of property and space, as well as the availability of labor has improved. Although satisfaction with the internet services and the roads and streets have declined with our announcement yesterday, that will continue that will improve as internet services will start to improve quite soon, and the fiber will be online this year. COVID-19 has significantly impacted businesses, obviously, and most decision makers reported reduced revenues and pandemic-related stresses. This being said, most businesses have been able to hold on despite these challenges, and a similar number of respondents expect their business to close or be sold in 2019 as 2020. And only a few out of the businesses phoned, we received out of service phone numbers. So when we were phoning them, only 2% of the total contact list were out of service, which is good. We also reported that 31% of businesses have plans for expansion, which is great news and speaks to the resiliency and determination of our business community. Additional considerations and suggested strategies resulting from the survey included more one-on-one support programs. So one-on-one support programs and experts that can talk businesses through business licensing and permitting processes to ensure the businesses and experiences go smoothly, as well as continuous engagement with small and medium-sized businesses. Continuous engagement and dialogue with small and medium businesses to help businesses figure out how their customers' needs have changed. Understanding new consumer behavior, such as increased online shopping, will help businesses adjust to the present situation. Long-term viability also depends on understanding how a customer needs will be different when the pandemic is over. So taking those considerations into consideration, in 2021, a new and revised business license process was implemented, making the process for new businesses simpler and more efficient for the customer. We're working on and updating, improving the renewal process to roll out hopefully for 2022. Again, with those considerations and recommendations, with direction from City Council, a business retention specialist position was added in 2021 to support and engage with the business community. Again, just quickly reintroduce Jana Rao. She has joined us on the Zoom today and is in the chat again. Next slide, please. The Think Lloyd First movement is something that you may have seen or may be a part of on social media. It isn't just another marketing campaign, and we want that to be super clear. This is something that we hope is around to stay. Through the Lloydminster Economic Recovery Task Force and the 2020 Lloydminster Business Survey, an obvious need was established for the Support Local program. The Think Lloyd First movement is supported by several local organizations, so it's definitely not just a City of Lloydminster piece. We have Community Futures Lloydminster, the Lloydminster Chamber of Commerce, Startup Lloydminster, the Lloydminster Construction Association, Alberta Innovates, BDC, Lakeland College, and Discover Lloydminster, along with the city, making sure this program moves forward and that we promote and celebrate the local business community. Through this program, participating organizations are making connections, sharing resources, and celebrating business stories. The movement, or Think Lloyd First, includes a two-phase approach. We've activated and collaborated with the business community. Now we educate the consumer on the amazing businesses, service, and products available to them locally. Think Lloyd First encourages both businesses and individuals to actively advocate for local business among their respective networks, and extending the budget of the program and adding authenticity to the movement, really. Further to that, Think Lloyd First, the movement takes every opportunity to praise and reinforce people's efforts to think local and recognize that almost nobody does all of their business locally, but we can make them aware of what we do have locally and what purchases they can make locally, whether it be shopping in retail or services, all those sorts of things. One thing I want to make really clear is that our messaging avoids a guilt-based narrative, as guilting the consumer can be inefficient and sometimes counterintuitive. Instead, the messaging is a mix of product knowledge and information, again, on awareness and education on what's available and the amazing businesses we have locally. This benefits the consumer and is equally important to benefit the citizen as well as the community. I do want to make quick mention of it. I don't want to get into too specific, but next week, April 19th to 23rd, we are working in conjunction with the Lloydminster Construction Association on spotlighting and profiling construction companies and members of LCA. So from April 19th to 23rd on our social channels, both Facebook and Instagram, there will be business profiles in relation to construction and LCA members, as well as some exciting contesting. So please watch for that. Think local initiatives are extremely popular in Canada and North America, specifically during COVID. It's important to remember that communities, including Lloydminster and all of our surrounding communities, have obligations and legislation regarding procurement through NWPTA and CFTA. So today we have Mika with a full overview on the City of Lloydminster's procurement obligations and expectations.
Thank you, Catlin. I'll take it over from here. Thank you so much. Yeah, I want to reiterate that last point Catlin was saying, but I'll get into that throughout my procurement presentation. Let's start with an overview generally. So procurement means acquiring goods, works, and services from an outside source. Procurement is a term generally used by government, while businesses use the term purchasing or outsourcing. And procurement covers all types of small, large values, whether we're procuring a multi-million-dollar capital project or looking to procure office furniture. The process we must follow is fair. So as we are a municipality with a goal for transparency, all procurement done by the City of Lloydminster must be in a manner that is fair, accountable, and transparent. So I'm going to jump into our first poll here. Let's see how well I navigate it. So you guys should be seeing a quick poll. I'll wait a minute or so until I've got some responses in here, and I'll share the results. Okay, I've got just about half voted. A few more seconds. Okay, I've closed down the poll there in case you didn't get a chance to finish. Not a big deal, but I'll share some results here. So first question was, are you aware that the city has, or are you aware of the city's procurement and purchasing policy? And it looks like just 60% of you are aware of it. For those that aren't, our policy can be found on the city's website, along with all our other policies, bylaws, and legislative information there. Have you previously participated in a procurement or a bid submission with the City of Lloydminster? So 33% have, 60% haven't, and 7% are unsure. Really, this is kind of to give me an idea of our audience today to see how in-depth or at a high level that we will go through. So if yes, quite a few of you actually did put the type of procurement that you were involved in, a request for quote, proposals, or tenders, and 53% were unsure. So thank you for enlightening me with that information. Let's move into the next slide. So really, I will be going over a number of things today. Procurement as an overview, and I will be getting into the details of types of procurement, as well as how to hopefully help you be successful being awarded a contract with the city. So as I mentioned, procurement for the city covers a wide range of values for soliciting goods and services. As such, there are different requirements for different values. Public procurement, or open competition, is when a procurement is open to any and all vendors to submit a bid. According to some trade agreements that Catlin mentioned, above certain thresholds of spend, public procurement is a requirement municipalities and other organizations must follow. It is in place to promote fair processes and added competition in order to receive the best value for the dollars being spent. To go over limited procurement or invitational competition is when a limited number of vendors are requested or invited to submit a bid for a procurement. So this method is used when the procurement is below a certain threshold and public procurement is not required. I will briefly touch on sole or single sourcing, is when a single vendor is sought to provide the goods or services. This can be for a number of reasons. So either we have a specialized item that only one vendor can provide the goods, or they have a right to the process, or if a true emergency exists and there is no time to follow a procurement procedure. So these are just examples of why an organization might opt to sole or single source. This approach is definitely discouraged within the city, as it does not promote the best competition and is only used in situations such as the one that I mentioned before. Further into procurement obligations, the trade agreement. So two of the trade agreements that we predominantly fall under are the U.S. Partnership Trade Agreement and the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. For your information, there are other trade agreements, and one specifically that might apply to us, but at much higher dollar values than we typically are involved in. So as a municipality, we fall into what's called the MASH sector. That refers to regional and local forms of municipal government. This includes school boards and health service entities. We have requirements under these trade agreements. They provide rules and guidelines that we must follow. Not abiding by these rules puts liability on the city, which can result in fines, lawsuits, or other penalties. So it is my job to stay up to date with these laws and best practices and ensure the city's policy and procedures accurately reflect these standards. So as we're discussing different thresholds for public procurement, the procurement obligations under the trade agreements, such as the method of procurement, are triggered when a procuring entity, the city, contemplates a procurement valued at or above certain thresholds, either of the New West or the Canadian Free Trade Agreement. So we must follow the stricter of the two, so the lower thresholds. And in our case, this is the New West Partnership Trade Agreement, and the values are shown here. So you can see it is $75,000 for both goods and services, and $200,000 for construction. As for procurement under these thresholds, we are not required to follow the trade agreement rules. However, this is where the city's policy comes into play, and city administration must follow these requirements and guidelines, which I will get into a little bit later. So some general trade obligations. Generally, procuring entities must ensure that the covered procurements meet the four principles of openness. So openness refers to publicly advertising, posting a procurement on a tendering website, and allowing anyone to bid. Non-discrimination, avoid mandating unnecessary or specific requirements for a procurement in order to eliminate or make it more difficult for bidders for placing a bid. So a recent example that has been very much highlighted in the municipal procurement world lately, especially during COVID, has been not being allowed to include favoritism to local vendors or including a requirement that a vendor is local in order to bid. So the trade agreements don't discourage local bidders, but they will not allow the procuring entity to give an undue advantage to anyone. The goal of the trade agreements are to promote fairness. Non-circumvention, so not splitting up or dividing procurement in order to get around the obligations of the trade agreements. And transparency. So this is demonstrated in a number of ways through public advertising, transparency in our policy, transparency in our bid documents, even transparency in events such as today's. So the city puts forth its best efforts to communicate and provide useful information to all. So more into our obligations are the Lloydminster Charter is it's document that governs our city. It really provides the framework for administration and governance for the city of Lloydminster. A little history on it, it was approved by both provinces, and it gives our city council the same authority that is provided to municipal governments in both provinces. The document recognizes our unique challenge of being on the provincial border. And where possible, it provides authority to apply legislation from one province to apply it over the entire city to enable a seamless rules where possible. So applying it to procurement, it directly applies in many ways. We advertise procurement opportunities on both Alberta and Saskatchewan tendering sites. It applies to safety, taxation, and other requirements that are all part of the procurement process. And then we have the city's procurement and purchasing policy, which is guided by the trade agreements with some additional requirements from the city, such as additional advertising, reporting requirements, council requirements, and approval processes. This policy is in place to promote the obligations of the trade agreements, but also to directly provide our community with information and updates on their council and administration's activity. So some more interesting stuff is how can you as a vendor anticipate opportunities that may arise? So the first thing to be aware of is the budget. So the city openly discusses the budget during council and governance priorities meetings, and actually distributes a survey each year on how citizens feel about the budget and how it should be allocated. So I do highly encourage you to, that's a starting place, somewhere to begin, and to complete those surveys because they definitely are looked at and they're reported back to council on an annual basis. So once the budget is discussed and approved by council, the budget is posted to the city's website, which typically happens in Q4, so that administration can start planning the procurement for the next calendar year. So I guess just a heads up that the approved budget and a capital project list is posted to the city's website. And if you want more information on where you can find it, definitely reach out to that procurement email and we can get back to you on that. And so these lists are posted for complete transparency to the public. Procurement-wise, this list is a good notice to vendors of what projects may come up during the year. Since the procurement method is not determined at the time that this is released, a procurement may not be completed for several months or even into the end of the calendar year, but it's a start. Another place on how to become aware or to find opportunities is the city website. So if you go to the city website under business and growth, you'll find the procurement platform as well as economic developments page and information. And then bids and tenders is the city's tendering platform. So it's our choice of platform to use to advertise even further potential contracts or business opportunities. It is free to create an account and start registering for bids. You can customize your account and receive notifications pertaining to your business. So even if you might not be providing the main goods or services, you might be able to find opportunities that you can either subcontract or somehow support the project. If you do want more information on bids and tenders, feel free to, sorry, Marilyn, thank you. I see you posted the link to the budget. But again, if you want more information on bids and tenders, please feel free to reach out. And we've got a good help center that can help you with making those accounts. As for our provincial requirements, we post all our opportunities again to SASC tenders and Alberta Purchasing Connect. Also, any construction related projects, we work with our Lloydminster Construction Association, and they help post those opportunities even to a wider network on BuildWorks Canada. On occasion, we do use social media to promote certain projects, depending on the audience. So if you follow the city on social media, you may find opportunities there as well. So for other opportunities, I did want to mention, the city does not currently have a citywide pre-approved list of vendors that it solely works with. Some pre-qualifications are completed mostly for construction related project, but that's not to be confused with a pre-approved list. So what this means for you is there is no pre-qualification required to be considered for a contract. Depending on the service or work required, there are definitely safety and other considerations that need to be met, but it is not something that you need to pre-qualify beforehand. Anyone can do business with the city. And another way to put your business in touch with the city is to email that procurement email, and your information will be distributed to department managers across the city. So whether your business is new to the city, providing new services, or you just want to get in touch, or for more information, procurement works as a centralized point for this type of information distribution. A little bit of knowledge on procurement methodology. I did see from the poll that some of you are already aware of this, but I'll go a little bit more into detail. So this is a methodology at a very high level. So here are some examples of types of procurement documents suggested by the policy and guided by the trade agreements. So by no means is this an exhaustive list. As you can see, these thresholds here, you're going to see the $75,000 for goods and services and $200,000 for construction. So these amounts are have a correlating request document. So you'll see for anything under those thresholds, we have a request for quotation document. Anything above it for goods and services is a request for proposal, and for construction, request for tender. A request for quotes can come in many different forms. Our policy does mandate that a minimum of 3 quotes is sought for most procurement. So for certain procurement, an RFQ, which I'll call it, will simply be a request for price and a deadline to submit a quote. So an example of this will be a low dollar value item, a commodity item, something with standard features. Another RFQ might have a more detailed request, such as the scope of work or services to be performed, available information such as site conditions or existing equipment conditions, anything that we know to help you provide a proper and full quote. So it may seem obvious, but there's also a question period available for when you are able to ask the project manager questions on this quote. So there is a question deadline in order for us to still meet our procurement deadlines. An RFP, I guess I want to mention one more thing on their request for quotes is that in the past, you may not have seen seen this level of detail in a request for quote. So you might be used to just providing a price and that's it. So just really watch for what is being requested, especially as of late. Request for proposal. These are widely used in public procurement and by government, but also other organizations. The intent of the RFP is to achieve the best value for that project by evaluating criteria other than price. Price is still a very important factor to the city as recognized in our policy. However, we must recognize factors such as qualifications, methodologies or solutions, or delivery times in order to properly run our operations. Warranties is another one that is usually highly considered. And then for construction or construction related procurement, typically, but not always, a tender document is used. Tender documents thoroughly go over requirements and specifications of the work, sometimes providing quantities to bid on. In these cases, qualified bidders are submitting based on lowest price. So I think I've covered that. I don't see too many questions in the chat about so far, but by all means, throw your questions in if I'm going too fast or if you miss something. So other methods of procurements or types of contracts. I think the point I want to drive home and that I can't stress enough is that each procurement is treated differently because each project has different needs. Everything the city does must follow all legislation, specifically our procurement and purchasing policy. So working within those rules, different solutions can be found. An organization chooses procurement methods and contract templates based on their needs. So certain methods can help achieve an earlier completion date. Some allow the organization the most flexibility or input into a project. and some are intended to remove a high amount of liability from the procuring organization. So different methods, we're always working with the vendor, whether contractor or consultant. We work closely with them, but different methods definitely allow for different levels of liability and control. So I'm just going to briefly discuss the contracts the city uses. Most often we use the contracts, our own contract templates. We work very close with our own legal firm to develop specific requirements, such as being a border city, that really reflect our needs. But another example of contract types chosen based on the procurement method are CCDC templates. So again, we work closely with the Lloydminster Construction Association to use and distribute the appropriate CCDC templates. I would also like to discuss some newer methods of procurement to the city that you may have heard about: construction management, QBS or qualification-based selection, IPD, meaning integrated project delivery. So this is the delivery method that is currently being used on our wastewater treatment facility right now. And then we have buying group contracts. So each of these methods has its obviously pros and cons to each method, but definitely potential advantages. So I will take construction management and QBS for an example. So potential advantages could be enhanced quality control, reduced liability for the city, and potentially shortened construction timelines. So with these methods, there are different internal approval procedures. They don't necessarily fit the clean cookie cutter shape that our procurement policy likes to follow or tends to follow, but they fit within our legislation and just require more approval. So you might hear them spoken about more at city council meetings. So submitting quotes and bids, I'm going to try to launch our second poll. See how many of you I still have here. Okay, we've got quite a response this time. That's really good. I'm going to end the poll. And share the results. If I could just get a nod from someone to make sure that you guys can see the results on this poll, great, thank you. Thanks, Vern. First question is, has your organization been awarded a procurement in the past? 12% saying yes, 76 saying no, and 12 being unsure. In your opinion, is the city required to always contract based on the lowest dollar value? So we did have one person say yes, 7 respondents said situationally yes, and 9 said no. So we'll get into the details of how contracts are typically awarded. And in your opinion, should vendors be able to communicate areas that lack clarity prior to submitting a bid? Great, I'm glad to see 100% of people said yes. And this is absolutely the case. We've definitely seen in the past, I think, a miscommunication or misunderstanding that you're requested to submit a bid and that's it. There's no communication that happens between you and the project manager beforehand, but that is not the case. So I'm glad you guys all answered that one. So I'll just quickly read over. So basically submitting a quote or bid, you will see more detailed requirements within the quotes or request for quote. So really to pay attention on what is being asked, qualifications, past projects, and delivery time. These are all things that will help us determine how to award a bid. So what happens to your bid after you submit? A few things. One thing to note is evaluation will be different for different types of procurement. For example, your bid will either be evaluated by a team or solely by the purchaser, or who I'll refer to as the project manager and their approver. So generally, these are things that are looked at. Timeliness. Did you submit your bid on time or before the closing date? So for public procurement, this is a very sticky point. Accepting a late submission deems it a non-compliant bid, and accepting that would add a huge amount of liability on the city. Therefore, we cannot accept submissions that are late. This has been something that's been questioned before, but I do just want to educate you guys and let you know that it is a very hard line there, especially within the trade agreements. Your bid is checked for mandatory requirements. So was there anything identified within the request that stated it was mandatory? Again, missing one of these components automatically disqualifies a bid. So you're checked for compliancy. And then depending on the method, you're either scored by the evaluation criteria provided or solely on price. So we put together just a list of some of the most common mistakes that we've seen in the past, hopefully to help you out and not make these mistakes. So common mistakes we see that may be preventable and turn non-compliant bids into potentially winning bids. The first one is missing mandatory requirements. I think what was done in the past and potentially what vendors are used to is just submitting a price. So yes, being competitive with the price is very important, but sometimes we are looking for other features as well. And sometimes it just comes down to safety or warranty, factors like that, that really make a project complete. So I will speak a little bit about requests for proposals. This is what this letter has to do with. So what some people don't realize is that at the time of procurement, even if you do not have all the documents that are identified as mandatory, you may let the project manager know that you intend to have them in place at the time the contract is awarded. So this can be done via a statement or a letter. It is best to ask the question to the project manager before the bid closes. Once the bid closes, it's a little harder to work with as opposed to before the bid closes. For example, this way you're not having to go through the process of adding the city to your insurance, say if that was a requirement, if you are simply providing a bid and are not awarded the contract. So evaluation criteria. I'm going to skip to the next slide to discuss this one. So for the evaluation criteria, we see missing information. So as I mentioned before, really watch what is being asked. Sometimes or often in our either request for quotes or our request for proposals, you will see this chart that I provided. This is just an example of one where we are asking for references or past projects, project team and experience, methodology and work plan, and then the financial component of the bid. So lots of times we see past projects that are not relevant to the project at hand. When our evaluation team is scoring, they are looking to see that you have completed projects similar, well, as close to similar as the project at hand to make sure the company is qualified. References. Often we find that people don't provide references, or when we're contacting references, we don't get an answer. So either they weren't notified that they were a reference on a project. And resumes, again, this has to do with project team experience. For each of these evaluation criteria, it should be very clear in the request document what we are looking for. If it is not, please reach out to the project manager or the purchaser that it is not clear. But it should be there and should clearly lay out what we are looking for to award a bid. And then this last point that says other factors and lots of information. So what I'm referring to there is we are only able to score content that is based on the evaluation criteria. So, and the criteria that we've identified. So on the flip side of that, we can only assign scores or points to information you're providing in your submission. So even though it may seem obvious or maybe information the city should know from past experiences, it's important to include it in your submission. Just because we know you are a very well reputable company within the city, it may not be obvious to everyone. So it is very important to include it in your submission. And then the biggest point that I really want to highlight here is not asking questions. So we do our best to provide accurate, informative, and complete procurement documentation. At times it may be more understandable to us than it is to you, the reader. So I highly recommend asking questions that you are unsure about, just like any other situation. In some case, a response to all bidders or an addendum will be issued to everyone in order to update the content of the request. I also bring this up because in several debriefs or post-procurement interviews that we've conducted, there were simple clarifications made that would have completely changed a bidder's response. So these small factors can play a big role. So I've highlighted here just a quick timeline or example of a timeline. Close of questions means that is the last day to ask your questions of the vendor. The final issue of addenda is the latest that we will provide changes or responses to questions. And then between that March 19th and March 24th, it allows you to have the final document to provide your complete response. So again, this is for a request for proposal. So if it looks a little bit overwhelming, this is usually for these larger projects. However, you can expect them on some smaller projects as well. So some best practices of submitting a bid. Again, clearly identify mandatory requirements. And if you do not have them, make the request of the project manager or identify it in a letter somewhere stating that you don't currently have them, but you will seek them once you are awarded a contract. I think the biggest thing is to demonstrate that you understand the project of the goal or the goal of the project. I think that's really all anyone is looking for, besides the financial factor, but really on the evaluation criteria is that you can demonstrate that you understand the project. and then following the evaluation criteria to a T. So the emphasis on high weighting, if you see that qualifications is heavily weighted, 50 points towards qualifications, be sure to emphasize your company qualifications or your personnel. So you might decide, if you see that on a project, you might choose to pick your most experienced personnel and assign them to that project. So what is being looked for? Past projects, we are looking for similarity of scopes performed. Dollar value is not that important, doesn't matter the size or scale of it, but definitely similarity of scopes. References, we're looking for quality of service, and sometimes we are asked, or you are asked for samples to provide an actual sample or the quality of goods. We have not done this so much during COVID. It makes it a little harder to do some in-person things, but even interviews have been conducted via Teams or Zoom virtually. So we really try to make sure that communication is still happening. And just a general note is that if your content is organized and easy to read, it is better recepted by those that are evaluating. So not that you have to go out and spend a bunch of money to make nice designs, but if it is organized, it is definitely easier to go through the content. The award process. So you are aware, yes, the budget is approved by council, typically fourth quarter of the year. However, for each procurement that we conduct, there is an internal approval process as well. So just dotting our I's, crossing our T's, making sure that everything is lining up and everything is following our legislation and policy. So there are different approval requirements for different thresholds of procurement. And just for your information, as per our policy, any procurement over 200,000 will automatically go to a council meeting for decision. And then for transparency's sake, some public procurements under this threshold are still presented in governance and priorities meetings where the procurement is discussed. So if you're interested and you want to follow along, our council meetings are streamed on YouTube. I think you can also find that link online, and maybe Marilyn or Jessica will be so kind as to link that for everyone in the chat. So after the award, where can I find results of the procurement? You can find them in a number of ways. For smaller procurement, I will just say, typically you are either notified or you can just talk with the purchaser. But for some of the more formal methods, we do have several quarterly reports where this information is found. We have capital project updates that happen on a quarterly basis, financial updates, and specifically we do update public procurement that happens on a quarterly basis, which identifies the type of procurement that was done, the vendor that was awarded, and the amount that the contract was awarded for. The results are also posted on bids and tenders. So bids and tenders is a great platform for the whole process, just to get a good overview or sense of what the city is contracting. And then this last one is notification letters. A notification will go out to the awarded vendor to have work out the contract, have that executed, but also notification letters go out to those that are not awarded. Within these notification letters, it will give you an opportunity to request a debrief. And I think my next slide talks about this, so I will go into that one. So a debrief, I guess a quick overview about what is a debrief. A debrief is a post-procurement interview between the project manager and the vendor, and sometimes other members of the evaluation team. Debriefs are typically offered on more formal methods of procurement. However, you may request one on any type of procurement that is done. The goal of the debrief is to provide the vendor with feedback in order to help improve your next submission. Through the evaluation process, submissions are reviewed, and positive or constructive feedback is always noted, but not often shared with the creators of the document. So this is just a venue for us to be able to share and provide that feedback. So when can I ask for one? We can only schedule debriefs with those requesting, or we only schedule debriefs with those that request one. Debriefs are offered via the notification letters or regret letters. And they are only scheduled after the contract is awarded and executed. We don't schedule any debriefs before that or before we have actually assigned or executed a contract. And what can I ask in a debrief? So some general topics include feedback and discussion on your submission. Were you missing anything, not just mandatory, were you missing anything major? Were there areas of improvement? We can let you know also the awarded contract value and who it was awarded to, and the evaluation process. So we can revisit the scoring criteria. Some things that we can't discuss in a debrief are details on other vendor submissions, including itemized scores. We do not include the breakdown of pricing of any other vendor's submissions. That is definitely confidential information, and sometimes their competitive advantage. We don't offer detailed scores from evaluators or the evaluators' names. These are things that just are not the goal, don't help with the goal of the debrief, and they would not help you in future procurements. I do just want to end with saying that debriefs are a great resource for both the bidder and the city. Our goal is continual improvement, and this avenue provides that for both parties. So I highly encourage you on your next procurement to reach out and request a debrief. And I think that is it. So thank you everyone for your attendance. I really appreciate each of you taking the time from your day and learning a little bit about this process. I actually love that I'm able to share this with you guys, and hopefully lots of this presentation directly pertains to you and your work. If there are other items that you would like to hear about from procurement or from the city, please let us know. We're always looking to try to gear these presentations and engagements towards what you are actually looking for. So before I get into the questions, just a reminder that there is a quick survey that I think Jessica will be putting in the chat, or she just did. Otherwise, if you don't have time right now, a link will be coming. We really appreciate your feedback on these types of sessions. And or my performance. I think Jessica and Marilyn have been working to monitor the chat. I'm not sure if many questions came in, but otherwise, feel free to unmute yourselves, and we can start some discussion or answer any questions that may not have been answered. And just, sorry if anyone's unmuting, just as a note, this is not a one-size-fits-all process, but more of a high level to show you what the process looks like and what our guidelines are. So again, this recording is posted, and we'll be providing you the link to that. So remember that my door is always open, and I will do my best to respond in a timely manner. But any procurement questions, yeah, please send them to the email that's here. Just reading the chat. You're welcome, guys. Yes, thanks, Catlin. Also, feel free to reach out to economic development. Like I mentioned, we work closely with them to help support businesses and conducting business and contracts with the city. So. Thanks, Dorothy. Thanks, Fern. I could probably talk about it a little more, but I will stop now. Absolutely, no problem, Dean. Okay, we'll stay live for a few more minutes in case any late questions come in. Yeah, by all means, feel free to send that procurement email any personal or not personal questions, obviously work-related questions, but more situational or specific questions you might have.